Salam and welcome to Somali Dispatch's YouTube channel. For Somali related news in English, please visit somalidispatch.com. My name is Abdul Qadir Goulet. A deadly hotel attack in Mogadishu took authorities over 30 hours to secure the venue this week. The Shabaab claimed attack at Hayat hotel saw the death of at least 20, injuring more than 100 people. The attack is the first since President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is elected to office in May of this year. To assess the threat and discuss ways to move forward, we've contacted Samira Gaid. She's the Executive Director of Hiraal Institute, a Horn of Africa security think tank based in Mogadishu. Salam and welcome, Samira Gaid. Thank you for joining us again here on Dispatches. If you could start us off by telling us what is known about the Hayat attack so far, and perhaps what's different about it this time around.
Okay, so the really tragic attack on Hayat Hotel in Mogadishu ended just today. I think this after 30 hours. It was probably the longest siege that we've had in Mogadishu, which was quite tragic. The police commissioner did a press conference. He indicated that the attack is over. He asked the Ministry of Health to update us on the casualties. I believe they said 21 people killed and many more, hundreds injured actually. That's what we know officially, but what I can tell you is that this attack is not surprising. We do know that Al-Shabaab will always strive to attack hotels where they believe government officials and people who are allied to the government would be staying. That's not the surprising part. The surprising part is the length of the siege, the fact that it took 30 hours to contain, the reports that we're hearing of some command and control issues between the security forces. At some point, the police were in charge, the NISA was in charge, and the police again. The damage to the hotel that has been done. So that's what's striking about this attack compared to other attacks.
Right. Perhaps some of the intelligence failures as well, because to put together an attack this magnitude and for NISA and the intelligence apparatus not to know and perhaps prepare speaks also to the failure. What can you tell us about that in terms of how people are discussing this amongst the security circles?
So what we know is that whenever Al-Shabaab is conducting this sort of attacks, there is some intelligence, some information that flows. And we do know that over the past 10 days, there's been a heightened security alert that there's going to be an attack, but it wasn't clear where exactly that was going to be. That I can say, has happened before. We've had numerous complex attacks. They have just always, we've always been unable, the intelligence have always been unable to really pinpoint on exactly where the attack would be. But I think information had come to the government and was also with the partners that there would be a heightened security alert this week.
And with that out there, mass number of civilians to gather in what seems like a target area is also baffling to me. But what does this say about the attackers' sophistication and how they pulled it off on the length, given the length of the siege, as you said? What can that contribute to the discussions?
So first of all, the fact that they penetrated not just the green zone, but an area that is very close to the airport with such, we know that there was a suicide vehicle. Then they also had hand grenades and they did have suicide vests. We hear 6 attackers, between 3 and 6 attackers. We're not very sure about the number of the attackers yet. So all of this just points to the fact that they could access this. They must have had better route planning, better intelligence than the security forces had. And then the other issue that comes out of this is also something that we've seen a trend that they would have a suicide vehicle or a suicide bomber outside the hotel and wait for security responders. And we do know that the head of Mogadishu intelligence, as well as one of the senior security officers of the police, was wounded in such an attack. So the fact that they are adapting and ensuring that they have a secondary attack or secondary blast aimed at security forces, but the security forces are not learning and not changing their tactics to prevent this from happening or to prevent themselves from being injured through these attacks.
Right. The fact that the massive response from the security forces and how they were heavy-handed is among the discussion items within the security circles as well. The fact that Somali Army and security apparatus does not have a specific tactical force, or even if there is, the fact that they were not in charge of the hotel, securing the hotel, what does that say about the preparation of the army?
When it happens, when this complex attacks happens, the responsibility really lies with the police and the intelligence, right? And when the military is not really involved in the fast response of this kind of attack. They just maintain their usual operations. So it's between the police and the intelligence unit, who both have counterterrorism units that are aimed at responding to this. But what we do know is that the police initially responded, but after 2 hours of their response, they were asked to step back, and the intelligence took over. The intelligence unit that's called Alpha took over. Alpha Group is known for being heavy-handed, using explosives and all of this, and I think they're partly to blame for the destruction that we've seen of the hotel. And then they eventually handed over back to the police, and the police had to again reorganize and take control of the hotel and finish the attack. So for me, it just highlights that there was a problem, either in communication or coordination between the security forces in this response, and it makes sense just because the security agencies, some of them are still the previous security agencies, and we do have a new commander of the intelligence unit. There might have been a coordination, command and control challenge that led to this long siege.
What about the tactical aspect of it? Because as we all know, you need a tactical force to go into situations like that. And the fact that we're sending rank and file police officers and intelligence officers to deal with this kind of maybe speaks to the lack of a proper response to the tragedy. Would you agree with that?
From what I know from my experience, both these security forces have very able, capable tactical units. And the fact that those tactical units were utilized or not utilized long enough might be the challenge. That's why I'm saying it's more a coordination problem. Mm-hmm. The police, the first responders on the police are usually the average police officers who command the stations around there. But right after that, then the special police forces go in. And when they do go in, they take a maximum sometimes of 12 hours before they withdraw and give space to, the intelligence tactical unit that is much more capable. So the fact that we saw so many changes at the beginning of the attack might have been the problem. That lack of coordination, I think, is where the challenge lies. But in terms of capacity, I could tell you that the police and the intelligence unit both have very capable CT units that can, handle such a situation.
Right. This is the first hotel attack since President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is elected on a second non-consecutive term to office. What opportunities and challenges does this administration face in terms of clamping down on Al-Shabaab attacks like this?
I think this administration, had the advantage of a lot of goodwill. The president at the beginning of it, he did say that his focus would be security, that he would be focusing on the group, eradicating the group. He did talk about negotiations at the right time. He talked about fighting ideologically. But then I think there was a bit of a delay in the formation of the government, in the approval of that government. And that has sort of given a gap. And the security forces have become complacent, or there was a gap that has now been penetrated by Al-Shabaab. So I think the advantages still exist. The president still can, again, move swiftly to articulate his security agenda, how he intends to prioritize security. But at this moment, other than the words that security is a priority, we haven't seen specific actions, specific tasks that have been taken to show us that this is a priority.
Right. In an unprecedented move, Prime Minister Hamza Barre appointed a former Al-Shabaab second in command, releasing him from custody and then appointing him to a cabinet post. Could this help or hurt the administration's efforts?
I'm a believer that it would help the administration's posture, even if I do believe he was better suited in more of a CT role, a security role, rather than a Minister of Religious Affairs. But I do believe that, when it comes to the fight against Al-Shabaab, you really need to also provide hope to the men and women who are still part of the group, that they could leave and access politics and be part of the positive changes in the country. So I think in terms of communications, this move was positive. But whether it's going to prove successful, whether it's going to be successful in that specific ministry, time has to tell.
You've mentioned President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's recent announcements regarding how best to address the Al-Shabaab and security issues. Some are talking about the continuation of the fighting, perhaps, which the president mentioned is not best to deal with Al-Shabaab. Your thoughts?
I don't think that the approach has been clearly articulated yet. I know that initially he did come out and speak very clearly about having to negotiate with the group eventually. And then we had subsequent meetings where he talked about militarily degrading the group, eliminating the group rather than even degrading it. He said that would be his focus. And then we've also had them speak about ideologically, fighting the group, making sure that Islam is recognized as our religion and ours to keep, and not something that Al-Shabaab holds over the federal government. So I believe there's still clarity that needs to be given into what exactly the strategy is. Is it all three? Is it just militarily eradicating the group? Is it religiously? And then outside of now the rhetoric, then what actions have been taken specifically to address, whether it's militarily? We still have the old commanders who I believe are waiting to be relieved. The length that it takes to relieve them and appoint new ones also creates sort of a gap. We still haven't seen anything done ideologically other than the Prime Minister's speeches sometimes talking about the group. And so I think there's a lot more meat that needs to be put to the strategy. And for me, a response to Al-Shabaab does not only involve those three. Those are important aspects, ideologically, financially. Those are all important aspects. But, Somali ownership, the federal member states and the federal government seeing eye to eye on this war and also coordinating their efforts, I think is most important. And that, I think, would be the challenging part, to get all the federal member states, the federal government, to get all the clans, to get the business community all on board onto a counterterrorism strategy. That should be where the bulk of the work is. And I don't see any movement in that direction.
How about the foreign troops that are present in Somalia and supposed to help Somalis contain this threat? What is their role? Where are they? We haven't heard anything about ATMIS in terms of either responding to similar attacks or advancing at the perimeter or perhaps expanding the perimeter of Somali government's control on vast swaths of the country.
Yeah, so the ATMIS challenge, I think, is also going to be part of President Hassan Sheikh's challenges. When he came into power in 2012, ATMIS at that time AMISOM was growing, and now he has an opposite challenge with AMISOM drawing down. They have a very specific challenge at the end of this year. ATMIS is supposed to draw down by another 2,000 forces. Somali forces are supposed to be generated to replace those ATMIS forces. So I think it's much more challenging coordinating with ATMIS at the moment. And with them cutting down their numbers, they're now at around 19,000, you will find them, more inclined to work on securing their bases, more defensive postured than offensive postured. So I don't know if we should at all be relying on ATMIS to lead with this counterterrorism war, but we should really be taking advantage of the time that they're here to reorganize ourselves and also take a leadership role.
Right. This comes at the heels of Al-Shabaab recently, going into Ethiopia and fighting, taking attacks against Kenyan Somali populations who were participating in elections. There are ongoing fights all over the southern part of Somalia. What does this say about the group, which was supposed to be on a back foot, but seemed to be expanding and perhaps up in their attacks against Somalis? What does this say about the capability of Al-Shabaab recently?
Technically, I don't think the group has changed much. They haven't had, a huge surge of supporters joining them. I don't think they have a lot of support from the Somali population. They're coerced into supporting the group, or they have to live with them in the territories that they control. But the challenge is the other side, the alternative. The alternative is that for the past 2 years, we have been stuck in a political season that took too long. Now we have a new administration. The new administration is taking a bit long to set out its security priorities and actualize them. So the challenge has not always been Al-Shabaab. I don't think their capacities have changed. If anything, they have really expanded on their revenue collection, but I think operationally they remain the same. The other side, the Somali security forces have improved. You've had, new trained forces, but then you've also had this distrust in the trained forces. You've had distrust between the federal government and the federal member states. You've had, this challenge between security agencies. And so the other side, the alternative to Al-Shabaab, is where the challenge is. And I think that's where the focus should be.
Lastly, there are Somali Army personnel in Eritrea being trained, upwards of 5,000. The president recently visited them. Do you know anything about their future? Can we somehow leverage and utilize them in curbing out Al-Shabaab attacks?
I think that was very positive initially that the president made his first trip to Eritrea to see these forces. I think they'll be very integral in especially this drawdown of ATMIS, having those forces back there, Somali young men who can contribute positively to this challenge that we're currently facing. But I think there's been sort of like a lull, a slowdown on those efforts, and it would be key. It would be good to know what the challenge is and how the president can fast track that, especially in light of this attack and under the challenge of December 2000 ATMIS forces withdrawing. I think it'll be critical for those forces to be brought back in, integrated into the forces, and then utilized.
What are your thoughts on the reasons they're still out there, given that they've concluded their training a long time ago?
I think they might be a challenge that nobody has really articulated yet or has put out to the public yet. It's definitely a challenge, and I think that's why President Farmajo was unable to return them in time during his tenure. And now that President Hassan Sheikh has taken over, I think he's also having the same challenge, but they're not being clear as specifically what the challenge is. Is it a monetary challenge? Is it a political challenge? We don't know, but there seems to be a challenge that needs to be worked through with Eritrea to bring back those forces.
Thank you so much, Samira Gaid. I can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise with us and always being available to us to speak to you. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
You as well.